One of the most popular laptops that you see out there at university or in class are the MacBooks. And now they've upped their game with the new 14-inch that people have been waiting for ages, and the 16-inch with the new M1 chips. To be honest, looking at this as a student, it's very unlikely that you're gonna need this unless you have some very specific use cases and you're trying to consider between getting the 16-inch, the 14-inch, the M1 Pro, or the M1 Max, and I'm gonna be answering some of those questions today. Hey guys, Archie here, a second-year medical student, and on this channel we focus usually on learning how to learn so we can spend our time more intentionally on the things and people that matter the most to us. I've always been into tech ever since I taught myself how to code, and having a device that is able to keep up with my demands is something that I really liked. If you follow this channel as well, you know that most of the things I also use are Apple. So naturally, I was keen to check out these two new laptops to see if it fits my workflow better. So we're gonna start off by looking at the Air versus the Pro, because that's probably the main consideration. And also, how does this 14-inch MacBook Pro compared to the 13-inch MacBook Pro that they're still selling, the original M1 edition. And then we'll look a little bit more into the differences between the chips and the sizes. By the end of this video, you'll know which one is for you based off some of the things that we'll go through. I already have a video that compares between the old MacBook Pros and the MacBook Air, and pretty much most of it is the same, but there are some important things that I want to bring up. For pretty much every student, the MacBook Pro is just going to have some extra features that you don't really need as a student, and the Air is going to be more than fine because it's within a price range that isn't too expensive. But the Pro is actually a good laptop for those who are going to be using it intensively for a long amount of time. Maybe you're going to be doing coding on it, you're going to be doing video, Photoshop, anything like that. If you see yourself running a lot on applications with some that might be intensive at the same time, then you might want to give the Pro a closer look. I find myself often having to run Zoom, stream, and record my screen at the same time, and so that can be quite a lot on my existing MacBook Pro 16-inch. I have the 2019 edition, the i9, which is pretty much maxed out, and it's an absolute jet engine. I didn't realize that it was gonna have that much of a problem with the fans and the cooling, because Apple has spent a lot of time trying to make it extra thin. And now when they're going back to the 16-inch, which is like bulky, it's so bulky, I'm actually glad that they've done this, because it means that the device can be pretty much silent. I have tried to get the fans on this going, and I've only really been able to get it up to like maybe 30% when I was doing benchmark tests on it. Since the MacBook Air now has that M1 chip, it is almost as good as last year's MacBook Pro M1. So essentially, it is more than enough, even with 16 gigabytes, to keep up with the multitasking needs of a student. Now, this sort of brings up the question when we start to consider the 14-inch MacBook Pro. How does this compare to the 13-inch MacBook Pro and the 13-inch MacBook Air? If you're not sure whether to get the Air or the Pro, then you're probably best off just getting the Air, because if you needed the Pro, you probably would know that based on how you're using it. And I know people as well who run their whole YouTube channel. They're doing Photoshop, have 20 Chrome tabs open, Zoom, for example, and they're able to all run all of this on the MacBook Air with that M1 chip. With the introduction of Apple Silicon chips, the M1 series of, chips, these are just so much better than the Intel ones that have been in MacBooks previously. It's completely a different territory. If you think about it, I invested a lot into this i9 MacBook Pro, and then the MacBook Air comes along with the M1 chip, smashing it, and this costs quite a lot. So, any entry device with that M1 chip is just gonna be absolutely outstanding right now. Feel free to actually talk to the Apple staff if you think that 16 gigabytes of RAM is not gonna be really enough for you. For most cases it is, but to be honest, again, you want to focus on buying RAM because that cannot be replaced. I mean, the storage can't be replaced as well, but it's more easy to get a hard drive if you needed to. That way you can save some bucks when you're going for these very expensive machines. The main thing that attracts everyone to these new laptops is the upgrade in the M1. Now we're looking at the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips, which just are so powerful. I'm actually concerned that, trying out this device isn't actually for me anymore because it's just too powerful, right? And the laptop that I currently have here, I don't feel it was enough, and I went for, the highest that was available. These are by far the most powerful chips that we've ever seen in a MacBook. And in fact, some of the performance metrics on these is when you're exporting a video, when you're working in video, is actually outperforming a lot of those PCs that are out there that cost a lot more. So to have that in a portable device is absolutely crazy for video creators like myself. Any students who are in art, you know, this is something you might want to be considering if you've got some extra cash. And another thing that's really interesting is because Apple's been optimizing these and the power consumption of these chips is so much lower compared to Intel, the performance on these, unplugged or plugged, is pretty much the same. And you can edit quite a lot and still get a lot of battery out of this. In fact, if you're looking at the 16-inch, this is the biggest battery that you can actually even take onto a plane. And so, you know, that means it's gonna have good battery life. And when you compare this to any of the other laptops out there, this is probably one with the best battery life that there is. For now, that may be. So, you know, if you are a video creator, yes, when you start looking at some of the codecs like ProRes, your editing time is gonna be a lot more quicker. But I don't think that's much of an issue anyway with the export times. It's just fast. So when we look at the M1, it has a GPU that is 2 times faster than the previous M1. With that M1 Pro, you can get 32 gigs of RAM, which I think is more than enough for anyone who's more of a little bit of a power user. 64 is quite a lot. And then the M1 Max is the biggest chip that Apple has ever created. It generates less heat, the fans go up less quickly, and that means that the battery life on this can be longer. So with the M1 Max, you have a 4 times faster GPU in this compared to the M1, but you do kind of pay for that a little bit with battery life because now you have to support this GPU that is a little bit more power intensive. And this also allows you to get that 64 gigabytes of memory. Again, that's a massive amount of RAM. You really don't need it unless you're dealing with really high quality footage quite often. Now, they finally got rid of the touch bar, and I have a mixed relationship with it. I find it nice to be able to have that little slider, but when I'm trying to do things quickly, it just gets in the way. And now going backwards with these bigger function keys, right? These are bigger than what they used to be when we didn't have the touch bar. I actually really like this. And that muscle memory is kicked back in and I'm able to change songs really quickly and the sound, and it's just great. So yeah, that touch bar has been more of a gimmick, hasn't really been of high utility for me. Now we do have the, everyone's talking about this notch. I don't really even notice it, especially with a lot of the time that I spent in these past 2 weeks on the 16-inch because it has a big screen. I'm not really looking up there that often. And even with the 14-inch, I feel the same, right? You can talk about it, but when you use it for a long time, you barely notice it. And especially when you're playing YouTube videos or going into full screen into certain applications, the notch kind of disappears. When it comes to the mini LED display, that liquid retina display on here, it is just so great. And it feels like you're in a store just looking at TVs and you can put all that promotional content on it. But that's something that a student definitely does not need unless you're dealing with, you know, you would realize if you're the person who needs this as an art student maybe. Now, what is the game changer for the creatives out there is we've got ports back. We've got the HDMI, we've got the SD card, and this is something that I have my old MacBook. Actually, I'm gonna get it. Okay, so this is my laptop from 2013 and I still have it, I still use it just because I've been too lazy to get a dongle for the SD card and HDMI. And so I'm just so happy that it's being brought back to these laptops because that's something I want to use quite a lot. And so you can look at it like, I don't know how many years it's been now, right? We have the SD card and the only thing that's changed between these is that USB-C versus the USB-A. Now in the previous MacBook 16-inch, you had 4 ports for the USB-C. That would also include the charger. But now that there's a separate MagSafe charger, you actually can feel like you've got more ports, which is really good because, you know, the MacBooks are known for not having that many. And another thing to notice is that this SD card actually isn't the most updated, as well as the HDMI, unfortunately, but you know, having it in the machine is just super useful. And I've decided that I'm going to be converting from my previous 16-inch to the new 16-inch. I haven't quite decided if I'm going to go for the Max or the Pro, but I'm considering to go for that Pro because I don't think I'm going to use all the power of the M1 Max that I have here. It's just way too powerful. And having that, you know, big amount of battery life is something that's pretty enticing to me. So if you look at the 14-inch, we have up to 17 hours of battery, and for the starting price, you're looking at $2,999. That is a lot. You can either get that M1 Pro chip or the M1 Max, but they do notice that the performance on the 14-inch is going to be slightly lower than what you find in the 16-inch, but you're really not going to notice it because, again, if you're using these devices, they just are fast, and that's what really matters. It doesn't really matter if a video exports in 2 minutes or 2 minutes and 10 seconds, you're not going to notice a difference. When it comes to the 16-inch, you can get up to 21 hours of battery life. That genuinely means that I can last a whole day, even using it intensively, maybe not editing, but being in Zooms and such, where I can not have this plugged in at all. I'm still at the point where walking around uni, I'm always charging just because I'm always anxious that I'm gonna get near zero when I need it. But the current old 16-inch that I'm using uses so much power, and it has a big battery, but it just uses up a lot. So the price that you're looking at when considering this is $3,749. That is a huge jump up from the 14-inch. So if you're wanting to decide between these two pros, they're essentially identical besides the size and a little bit about the battery and performance. But the two things that are gonna really matter is the price and the portability of this. They do weigh a little bit more. So I am concerned when I travel, how much this is gonna impact what I can put in my bag. But if you want the biggest and the best and you have the cash to burn, then sure, go ahead and get the 16-inch. This is honestly one of the best laptops that you can get out there, but you are going to have to pay for it. You could make an incredible desktop off that amount of money that you're buying multiple CPUs and GPUs, but that's not why you're watching this video, because you want something that is a laptop, that is portable. And that's something we haven't really seen until this year. So Apple has done an amazing engineering job with some of these laptops. So the one that I'm thinking of is the MacBook Pro 16-inch M1 Pro. Okay, and that's a mouthful, isn't it? Overall, if you are considering between these two, I would be recommending the 14-inch. It's much more affordable, has everything you need. But if you are someone who actually prefers the biggest size, has cash to burn, maybe the 16-inch is for you. All right, thanks guys for watching. And if you enjoy this, make sure to check out my other video on the iPads, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.